Hey there, sleepy traveler. Welcome back to Sleeping Historian, the cozy corner where we whisper history's most fascinating tales to help you drift off. Tonight's journey is called When Time Began, the story of clocks and calendars. We'll wander through sundials and water clocks, travel with ancient philosophers, and follow ticking gears all the way to the phones in our pockets. If you love these bedtime stories from the past, take a second, maybe just one of those precious seconds we were talking about tonight, to subscribe to Sleeping Historian. That way, you'll never miss a chance to relax with another sleepy story. Now, tuck yourself in, breathe deeply, and let S step into the timeless tale of how humans learn to measure the moments of their lives. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a world with no ticking hands on the wall, no glowing numbers on a bedside table, no phone buzzing to tell you it's already too late or too early. Just darkness. Just the stars above, scattered like tiny fires in an endless sky. Back then, there was no official morning or afternoon. People didn't wake up to alarms. They woke up when the birds started their chatter, or when the first light brushed the horizon like a sleepy painter. Nights stretched longer in winter, shorter in summer, and nobody argued about daylight savings. Somewhere thousands of years ago, a small group of people huddled around a fire. Maybe it was a family. Maybe it was a tribe. One of them looked up, noticed the moon hanging fat and bright, and wondered, does the moon come back at the same time every night? The question lingered like smoke. Imagine a shepherd in the hills, lying on his back after a long day. Sheep are quiet now, and the sky is wide. He sees how the same stars seem to crawl across the heavens night after night. He starts to wonder if the stars are trying to tell him something, some secret message about when to plant, when to harvest, or maybe just when to head home for dinner. Without clocks, people used their senses. The warm smell of bread told them morning was slipping away. The long shadows across a field warned that night wasn't far. Time wasn't numbers. It was life itself, the rhythm of light, dark, hunger, and rest. But here's the funny thing. Even without clocks, people were still late sometimes. Picture two ancient hunters meeting to track a deer. One shows up while the mist is still thick. The other wanders in after the sun's halfway up. They probably argued. You said when the shadows were short. No, I said when the sun touched the hill. And without a single watch between them, neither could prove they were right. As humans grew cleverer, they started noticing patterns. The moon waxed and waned in a regular dance. The sun traced the same path each year, bringing the seasons like old friends. Rivers flooded on schedules. Migrating birds returned at almost the same time every spring. The world itself was a giant, ticking machine only. It didn't tick. It whispered. Think of ancient farmers watching the sky. They didn't call it astronomy yet. They just knew the days were changing. If they planted too early, frost would bite their crops. Too late, and the harvest would be small. Nature gave hints a longer day here, a brighter moon therein. People learned to listen. Imagine a child in an early village, lying awake under a wool blanket. Her grandmother points out constellations and says, when that star climbs high above the mountain, the rains will come. It wasn't science as we know it. It was trust, built on generations of careful watching. And in its own way, it was more reliable than any app on your phone. Life without clocks was slower. There was no rush hour traffic, no meetings scheduled at 3:15 sharp. People moved with the sun, but it wasn't all peaceful. Without precise time, you couldn't run a big city or make sure everyone showed up to build a temple on the same day. Trade, religion, and farming, everything would soon need something better. And so, the story of timekeeping began. It didn't start in a fancy laboratory or a high-tech workshop. It started here on quiet hillsides, under starry skies, around smoky fires. It began with curious eyes and small questions. When should we plant? Will the sun return? How long until the hunt? The seeds of calendars and clocks were already planted in those questions. But the answers would take thousands of years, countless clever minds, and a lot of trial and error. Before we dive into sundials, water clocks, and all the marvels to come, take one last mental step into that ancient darkness. Feel the cool night air. Hear the whisper of wind through grass. See the slow wheel of stars turning overhead. For all our modern gadgets, that sky hasn't changed. The same stars that guided them are shining down on you tonight.
Yes.
And as you breathe a little deeper,
Yes.
maybe you'll feel what they felt, a small sense of wonder, a hint of comfort, and the quiet thrill of being part of something that's been happening since time began. Long before gears and glowing screens, the greatest timekeeper of all was hanging right above everyone's heads. The sun. No batteries. No winding. No complicated instructions. Just a blazing ball of fire that rose and set day after day, without missing a shift. The first gold edge of sunlight peeks over the horizon. That's his alarm clock. No snooze button, no grumbling at a beeping phone. Just warmth spreading across the earth, telling him, wake up, the day is here. Humans noticed pretty quickly that the sun had a rhythm. It always rose in the east, always set in the west. Shadows stretched long in the early morning, shrank to nubs at noon, then grew again toward evening. Even without knowing words like astronomy or rotation, people sensed a dependable pattern. The sun was like an old friend who kept perfect appointments. Imagine a child in a tiny village, watching her own shadow dance across the dirt. In the morning, her shadow stretches out in front of her like it's trying to run away. By midday, it hides shyly under her feet. In the evening, it stretches behind her, long and dramatic, like it's saying, don't forget me when the night comes. Early societies turned these observations into tools. Ancient Egyptians, around 3500 BCE, are believed to have stuck simple poles, called gnomons, into the ground to track the movement of the sun shadow. A gnomon wasn't fancy, it's just a stick in the dirt. But with patience and sharp eyes, they could tell when midday arrived, or when certain seasons were on the way. In Babylon, priests kept a close eye on shadows falling across temple walls. It wasn't just about planting crops. Time was spiritual. Rituals had to happen when the sun was in the right place. Offerings were made, prayers were whispered, all guided by sunlight slipping across carved stone. But here's a funny image. A shepherd relying on the sun to tell time, only for a huge storm to roll in. The sky goes gray. The sun disappears. Suddenly, time feels slippery. You might grumble. Guess we're on storm o'clock now. Nature was a kind teacher, but not always a consistent one. Clouds, rain, and long winter nights reminded people that the sun's clock wasn't perfect. Over generations, sundials grew more sophisticated. Stone circles like Stonehenge, built in ancient Britain, weren't just for ceremonies. They also lined up with the sun at specific times of the year. In China, records show sundials being refined to track not only hours, but even seasonal changes. Every culture that watched the sun closely began building something. A carved rock here, a painted line there. Let's slow down and imagine an ancient marketplace. It's late afternoon. Merchants glance at the length of the shadows cast by tall poles. One vendor starts packing up his woven baskets, muttering. The sun says I'm done for today. Another vendor rolls her eyes. She's squeezing in a last sale before the shadow kisses a certain stone on the wall. The signal that evening is officially here. Sundials, in all their simplicity, carried a bit of poetry. The sun's movement was smooth and silent. Watching its shadow crawl across a dial felt like watching time breathe. There was no rush, no flickering numbers changing every second. Just the slow reminder that the world was turning, the day was passing, and tomorrow would come again. Of course, sundials had their limits. Try using one at midnight, or during a stormy week, or if you're a night watchman guarding the city gates. But when people started experimenting with water clocks and fire clocks, but that's a story for later. For now, think of the sun as humanity's very first and most generous clock. Even today, if you step outside and watch your own shadow, you're connected to those first sky watchers. Your feet might be on concrete instead of packed earth, but the same principle applies. The sun is still marking your day. Your shadow's slow shift is a quiet echo of their discoveries. As you drift towards sleep, imagine lying in an ancient meadow, feeling the sun's warmth on your face. Around you, distant voices laugh, animals graze lazily, and somewhere, a child is tracing shadows in the dust. The sun keeps moving overhead, steady and calm, just as it always has. And though our lives now hum with alarms and deadlines, the oldest clock of all is still ticking silently above. reminding us that time is at its heart, as simple as light and shadow. Picture a wide-open courtyard in ancient Egypt. The sun is bright, the air smells of warm stone and distant river water. In the center of the courtyard stands a simple stick planted upright in the ground. Nothing fancy. But to the people watching, that stick is a miracle. It's a sundial, and it can tell the story of a whole day. Sundials were the first real clocks people could build with their own hands. The idea was beautifully simple. As the sun moved, the shadow of the stick, or gnomon, if you want the official name, moved too. By marking where the shadow fell at different times, you could divide the day into sections. Morning might be when the shadow touched one line, midday when it hid close to the stick, and evening when it stretched long across the stones. The earliest sundials we know of go back over 3,500 years. Egyptians used T-shaped sundials carved from stone. Babylonians had their own versions, often tied to temples or city squares. The Greeks and Romans took the concept and turned it into art-building sundials that were not only useful but stunning, decorated with carvings of gods and mythic creatures. Imagine standing in a busy Roman forum, the air buzzing with merchants and philosophers, and glancing up at an elegant sundial carved with Jupiter's face to check the hour. But sundials weren't just practical. They were little storytellers. The shifting shadow reminded people that time itself was always moving. A Roman poet once grumbled that a sundial reminded him how quickly the day was slipping away. It was a gentle, silent nudge. Don't waste your daylight. Let's pause and imagine a quiet afternoon in ancient Greece. A philosopher sits beneath an olive tree, watching a sundial nearby. Maybe he's supposed to meet a friend when the shadow crosses a certain mark, but the friend shows up late, blaming the weather for messing up the reading. Even then, people probably teased each other. Don T blamed the sun at SU who overslept. Sundials also shaped daily routines. Farmers used them to know when to water crops or bring animals in from the fields. City leaders scheduled meetings based on shadow positions. Even temples planned prayers and sacrifices around the sun's steady march. A sundial on a temple wall wasn't just a gadget. It was a connection between the heavens and human life. The designs varied widely. Some sundials were simple, like a pole in the ground. Others were elaborate, with carved stone faces, numbers, and curved surfaces to track the sun through the seasons. Some were portable, small enough to carry on journeys, a kind of ancient pocket watch. Roman soldiers on campaigns sometimes used travel sundials to keep their days organized while marching across distant lands. But sundials weren't perfect, only worked on sunny days, and their accuracy changed with the seasons. A sundial that told perfect time in summer might run late in winter because of the sun's changing path. Ancient timekeepers had to learn to adjust, adding or subtracting a little based on the season. It was a reminder that time wasn't rigid. It was flexible, bending slightly with nature's rhythms. Still, there was something poetic about a sundial's limits. You couldn't rush it, couldn't check it at midnight. You had to trust the sky. In a world without glowing screens or buzzing alarms, the sundial asked for patience and awareness. It said, "Look up. Notice the world around you." Even today, sundials carry a special charm. Walk through an old garden or a university courtyard, and you might find one quietly waiting in a corner. The metal or stone dial, weathered by years, still catches the sun. It might not match your phone's time perfectly, but that's part of its magic. It connects you to every ancient farmer, priest, and traveler who once stood in the sun, squinting at a shadow to decide whether it was time for lunch. Some sundials even carry inscriptions, short phrases carved into their surfaces. One popular line from centuries ago reads, "I count only the sunny hours." It's a gentle, it's optimistic thought. Don't dwell on cloudy days. Remember the moments of light. As the afternoon grows long, picture yourself sitting on a warm stone step, watching the sun's shadow crawl across a dial. The day is slipping by, slow but steady. Somewhere, thousands of years ago, another person watched the same thing and felt the same quiet. The sundial wasn't just measuring time, it was sharing a story, whispered by sunlight and stone, passed down through generations. So next time you see your own shadow stretching across the ground, remember the people who turned that simple trick of light into a way to organize their lives. They trusted the sun, and in return, the sun gave them order, routine, and a touch of wonder. In its own quiet way, every sundial still tells that story, one slow-moving shadow at a time. Sundials were wonderful until the sun decided to hide. Clouds, storms, long winter nights. All those moments reminded people that shadows weren't always reliable. So clever minds turned to something else that was constant: water. Water flows, whether it's sunny or stormy. Even in the quiet of night, a drop will still fall. The first water clocks, called clepsydras, appeared thousands of years ago. Picture an ancient Egyptian temple around 1500 BCE. Torches flicker against painted walls. Priests gather for a midnight ritual. In one corner, a stone vessel stands filled with water. A tiny hole near the base lets water drip out, slow and steady, into another bowl. As the water level changes, markings carved on the inside of the vessel tell how much time has passed. No sun needed. Just gravity, patience, and a careful hand with a chisel. China had its own versions, elaborate bronze vessels with carefully designed spouts. In Babylon, scholars tracked the stars using water clocks. Even ancient Greece used them in courtrooms to keep speeches fair. A lawyer's argument had to fit within the flow of water from a single clepsydra. You could almost imagine a nervous speaker glancing at the dripping clock, thinking, "Come on, water, slow down." There's something soothing about a water clock. The sound of a drip in a quiet room, the shimmer of torchlight on liquid, it's almost meditative. If you've ever listened to rain on a rooftop or a fountain in a park, you know that calming feeling. Ancient people might have felt the same, even as they used that gentle flow to track the hours. Let's picture a watchman on a city wall in Mesopotamia. It's the middle of the night, stars faint behind a veil of clouds. He checks the water clock beside him, a small bowl catching drops. When the water reaches a line scratched on the side, it's time to change shifts. No bells, no flashing lights. Just water quietly doing its work. Water clocks also sparked innovation. Some cultures flipped the idea, letting water flow into a vessel instead of out. Others added floats or gears to turn dripping water into mechanical movement. By 250 BCE, a Greek inventor named Eusebius was making water clocks that rang bells, moved figures, and even displayed miniature doors opening like an ancient cuckoo clock powered by dripping water. But water clocks had their own quirks. Temperature mattered. Cold water flowed slower, warm water faster. Evaporation could steal time on hot days. Dust or algae could clog tiny holes. Ancient timekeepers had to babysit their devices, making adjustments and cleaning them. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than guessing in the dark. Even so, water clocks became symbols of wisdom and order. Temples used them to time prayers. Astronomers used them to record the movement of planets. Kings displayed elaborate water clocks as signs of power, wealth, and learning. To own a fine clepsydra was like having the latest smartphone, except instead of checking social media, you were impressing guests by counting the stars. Imagine a child sneaking into a temple at night, curious about the strange vessel by the altar. Listens to the soft drip, drip, drip echoing in the shadows. To him it might sound like the heartbeat of the world, steady, unhurried, eternal. In that quiet moment, he senses what humans everywhere have always felt, that time itself is flowing, like water slipping through fingers. In some ways, water clocks are still with us. Modern fountains and hourglasses filled with colored liquid are distant cousins of those ancient tools. The idea that time could be measured by a flow, whether of water, sand, or even light, started with someone long ago who listened carefully to a drip in the dark. Before you drift off to sleep tonight, think of that sound. Water falling, steady and calm. Imagine torches flickering against stone walls, priests whispering prayers, and the first scientists squinting at dripping vessels trying to pin down the invisible river of time. The water clock's message is simple but powerful. Even in darkness, even when the sky is hidden, time keeps moving softly, patiently, one drop at a time. Sometimes, the simplest things make the best clocks. After sundials and water clocks, people started experimenting with two other everyday elements, sand and fire. Both are humble, familiar, and when you look closely, wonderful at keeping track of time. Let's start with sand. Picture a sailor on a wooden ship, centuries ago. The sea is calm, the sky deep blue. In his hands he holds a small glass hourglass, two bulbs connected by a narrow neck. Fine sand trickles steadily from the top bulb to the bottom. No sun, no water. No gears, just gravity and grains. Hourglasses are beautifully simple. As long as the grains are fine and dry, they fall at a constant rate. Sailors use them for timing shifts and navigation. Monks use them to measure prayer intervals. Bakers use them to keep bread from burning. A single hourglass could quietly organize an entire day. Now imagine a monk in a stone-walled kitchen waiting for his bread to bake. He flips his hourglass and leans back, humming. The sand slides down in a soft stream. Maybe he dozes off a little, only to wake and find the bread perfectly golden in the hourglass. Not an alarm was his gentle reminder. There's a small magic to sand slipping through glass. It feels alive, like watching tiny stars fall. Even today we keep decorative hourglasses on desks not because we need them, but because they remind us of time's graceful flow. Unlike the anxious ticking of a modern clock, an hourglass is silent. It whispers, "Relax. Time is moving, but there's no rush." But what about fire? Humans have always gathered around flames cooking, telling stories, staying warm. It didn't take long for someone to notice that fire could measure time, too. Candle clocks were one of the earliest solutions. A candle would be marked with lines along its length. As it burned down to each line, a set amount of time had passed. Imagine a scholar in medieval China, bent over his scrolls. Beside him, a tall candle flickers gently. Every inch burned equals another chunk of time. When the flame reaches the halfway mark, he knows it's time to rest his eyes. Or picture a traveler in Japan lighting a marked candle at dusk. When it's burned halfway, he'll know to head back to his inn before the road grows too dark. Some candle clocks were surprisingly clever. Metal pins could be placed at certain points along the candle. As the wax melted, a pin would drop out and clang against a metal plate, making a little chime. It was an early form of an alarm clock powered by fire. Somewhere in history, a sleepy scholar probably jumped at that clang and muttered, "Right? Bedtime already?" Oil lamps were also used. By marking the reservoir and watching how quickly the oil burned, people could judge time passing. It wasn't perfect twine could speed things up. Bad wicks could slow things down, but it was good enough for monks, travelers, and night watchmen who couldn't see the sun or stars. Fire-based clocks had a special atmosphere. The glow of a candle or lamp wasn't just functional, it was comforting. The steady flame lit homes, temples, and taverns. It flickered over parchment, stone walls, and sleeping faces. Counting time by fire connected people to the very thing that made human life possible: warmth and light. Let's step into a medieval monastery for a moment. The halls are quiet. Outside, snow drifts against the windows. Inside, a lone monk studies by candlelight. The room smells of wax and old wood. He glances at the melting candle, notes the time, and sighs contentedly. The world beyond those walls might be chaotic, but here, time is gentle, measured by flame. Both sand and fire had their drawbacks. Hourglasses could clog or run unevenly if the sand was damp. A careless elbow could knock one over and erase your schedule. Candles burned faster in drafts or cheaper wax. Oil lamps could smoke or sputter. But for centuries, these simple tools guided daily life. Today, hourglasses and candles feel romantic and old-fashioned. We see them in movies or on shelves as decoration, and maybe we think of pirates or wizards. But their legacy is bigger than that. They were the reliable friends of sailors crossing oceans, monks keeping vigil, and families baking bread by firelight. Next time you light a candle or watch sand slip through an hourglass, take a slow breath. You're sharing a small tradition with people from thousands of years ago. They too paused to watch sand fall or wax melt. They too felt time's quiet heartbeat in a flicker of flame or a whisper of sand. As you drift toward sleep, picture a small ship rocking gently on the waves. Below deck, an hourglass stands on a wooden table, grains falling silently while sailors dream. Somewhere far inland, a candle burns low in a scholar's study, its flame marking the hours until dawn. Sand and fire, to humble companions, were humanity's gentle guides through the darkness, counting moments one grain, one flicker at a time. By the Middle Ages, people were ready for something sturdier than sundials, water drips, or flickering candles. Cities were growing, markets bustled, monks prayed on tight schedules, farmers needed to coordinate planting and harvest with ever busier towns. And so, the mechanical clock was born, a noisy, ingenious contraption of iron, gears, and bells that would change the rhythm of life forever. Imagine a small European village around the 13th century. Streets are narrow, paved with uneven stones. Chickens wander freely. Above the rooftops, a new tower rises, topped with a great bell. Inside, tucked between wooden beams, is a maze of gears, weights, and ropes, the village's very first mechanical clock. These early clocks didn't have faces or hands like ours. They didn't even tell you the exact minute. Instead, they rang a bell at set intervals, every hour or half hour. For most villagers, that was all they needed. When the bell tolled, the market opened, the gates closed, or the monks gathered for prayer. Time had a voice now, and it was loud enough for everyone to hear. Mechanical clocks worked on a clever principle. Weights attached to ropes or chains slowly unwound, turning gears. A device called an escapement controlled the speed, letting the gears move forward step by step, instead of spinning wildly. Each tick was a tiny moment of order in a world that had, until then, relied on shadows and drips. Picture a sleepy monk climbing the narrow tower stairs at dawn. The gears groan softly as he checks the mechanism. He winds the weights, giving the clock fresh energy for the day. When the bell rings, its deep sound rolls across fields and cottages, waking farmers and merchants. Somewhere, a child hears it from her bed and knows it's time to get up for chores. Mechanical clocks weren't just practical, they were symbols of pride. Towns competed to build the most impressive clock towers. Cities like Prague and Strasbourg turned their clocks into works of art, decorating them with moving figures of saints, angels, or even little devils. Imagine a crowd gathering in a square, waiting for the clock to strike noon. The gears grind, the bells clang, and tiny wooden figures march out to perform a short play. It wasn't just timekeeping, it was theater in the sky. These clocks also transformed how people thought about time. Before, life followed natural rhythms. Sunrise, sunset, seasons. Now, the day could be carved into equal mechanical pieces. Work shifts could be scheduled. Businesses could run on timetables. Monks could pray at precise intervals, even on cloudy days or long winter nights. Slowly, society began to run not on the sun or stars, but on machines. Of course, early mechanical clocks had their quirks. They drifted. A cold night or a warm day could throw them off. Gears wore out, ropes frayed, bells cracked. A gust of wind rattling a tower might stop a mechanism entirely. Clock keepers were part repairman, part artist, and part magician, coaxing their finicky devices back to life. There's a quiet romance in the thought of those first clock towers. On a winter night, snow falls gently on a silent village. Somewhere above, gears turn slowly, unseen. The bell tolls once, echoing over rooftops. A farmer stirs in his sleep, reassured that the world is still turning on time. Mechanical clocks didn't stay in towers forever. Smaller versions appeared in monasteries and wealthy homes. By the Renaissance, craftsmen began creating table clocks and eventually pocket watches. But those great bell towers were where the revolution began. Imagine a medieval festival in a bustling city square. Colorful banners flap in the breeze, merchants shout their wares. At noon, the crowd grows quiet as the city's famous clock prepares to chime. Wooden angels turn, a rooster figure flaps its wings, and the bell's deep tone rolls through the air. For a moment, everyone nobles, beggars, merchant shares the same heartbeat of time. Mechanical clocks gave time a new personality. It was no longer a whisper of shadow or the drip of water. It was a song of iron and bells, echoing across valleys and streets. Time had become loud, structured, and public. As you drift towards sleep, imagine lying in a quiet medieval village, hearing a distant bell count out the hours. Each toll is a reminder that people everywhere, farmers, monks, travelers, are connected by the same steady rhythm. In a way, those gears and bells didn't just measure time, they gave communities a shared pulse. A heartbeat that still echoes today every time a clock tower rings. The first mechanical clocks were impressive, but they stayed rooted in towers and monasteries. If you wanted to know the hour, you had to be near a bell or a dial. That worked until people started to wander farther. Merchants, sailors, scholars, and travelers wanted time to come with them. And so began the dream of portable timekeeping, a dream that would shrink entire clock towers into something you could slip into a pocket. Picture Europe in the late 1400s. The Renaissance is blooming. Artists paint ceilings that look like heaven itself. Explorers are sailing into unknown oceans. Craftsmen in Germany and Italy are tinkering with gears, determined to make clocks small enough to carry. These early watches weren't the sleek wristwatches we know today. They were chunky, round devices called Nuremberg, eggs named for their egg-like shape. They didn't have glass covers or minute hands, and they weren't terribly accurate. But to the people of the time, they were miracles. Imagine a merchant standing on a dock, about to board a ship bound for a faraway land. Round his neck on a chain hangs a small brass watch. It ticks quietly, a soft heartbeat in the noisy harbor. It may run a little fast or slow, but to him, it's a sign of progress, a tiny piece of a clock tower brought down to size. These early watches ran on spring-driven mechanisms. Instead of heavy weights, they used coiled metal springs, making them portable. They were often worn as pendants or carried in pockets by the wealthy. To own one wasn't just about keeping time, it was a statement. You were modern. You were connected to the cutting edge of science and craftsmanship. Let's pause and imagine an artisan hunched over a wooden workbench, a candle flickering nearby. Tiny gears, some no bigger than seeds, lie scattered before him. He files, polishes, and fits them together with steady hands. Outside, the night is quiet. Inside, the first whispers of portable time are taking shape. Of course, these early watches had their flaws. They lost minutes or even hours over a single day. Some didn't have hands at all, just little bells that chimed at set intervals. A nobleman might glance at his watch, shrugged, and think, well, it's probably around lunchtime, give or take an hour. But the exact time wasn't the point. The point was freedom. For the first time in history, you didn't need the sun, a tower, or a temple to know the hour. Time had become personal. As the Renaissance progressed, watches grew more refined. By the 1600s, minute hands became standard. Cases were engraved with intricate designs, floral patterns, family crests, even tiny portraits. A watch wasn't just a tool, it was a piece of jewelry, a family heirloom, and a conversation starter. Imagine two travelers meeting on a dusty road. One pulls out his watch with a proud grin. The other gasps, leans in to admire the craftsmanship, and says, "What a marvel you carry time itself." Also played roles in exploration and science. Navigators at sea could better track their journeys. Scholars studying the heavens could make more precise observations. A watch on a sailor's chain might help guide a ship across uncharted waters, even if it wasn't perfect. But perhaps the most charming part of these early portable clocks was the intimacy they created. A tower bell belonged to the whole town. Sundial belonged to anyone passing by. But a watch belonged to you. Could cup it in your hand, feel its weight, and listen to its heartbeat. It was your personal connection to the vast invisible flow of time. Let's picture a quiet moment. A young scholar in Italy, sitting under a grapevine-covered pergola at dusk. He takes out his brass watch, winding it carefully. The faint ticking mingles with the chirping of crickets. Somewhere far away, a bell tower tolls, but he doesn't need it anymore. He carries time in his pocket, and for a moment, the world feels both enormous and small enormous because of the oceans yet to be crossed. And small because a tiny machine keeps the universe's rhythm just for him. Today, we take portable time for granted. We glance at digital displays dozens of times a day. But if you ever hold an old pocket watch, hear its gentle ticking, and feel the weight of its history, you're touching the same wonder those first travelers felt. The journey from sundials to Nuremberg eggs was more than mechanical, it was emotional. It was about trust, adventure, and the human longing to keep the sky's secrets close at hand. As you drift off to sleep, imagine the soft ticking of a Renaissance watch, like a heartbeat from the past. Somewhere, a merchant at sea checks his pendant and smiles. A scholar wins his timepiece beneath the stars. In a whole world, step by step, is learning to carry time wherever it goes. By the mid-1600s, clocks had come a long way from dripping water and clanking gears. But even the fanciest watches and tower clocks still drifted, sometimes by hours. Sailors cursed them, scholars sighed over them, and monks quietly adjusted their schedules. Then, along came a simple idea, swinging weight on a string that would change everything. This was the age of the pendulum clock, and it brought a level of precision the world had never seen. The story starts with Galileo Galilei. One day, legend says, Galileo sat in a cathedral and watched a chandelier sway gently after being nudged. He noticed something strange. Whether the swings were wide or narrow, they took about the same time. To Galileo, this was more than a curiosity. It was a clue that swinging objects could keep time consistently. He sketched the idea of a pendulum clock, but never built one. A few decades later, a Dutch scientist named Christian Huygens took Galileo's idea and made it real. In 1656, Huygens built the first working pendulum clock. Imagine him in his study room, lined with books, quills, and brass instruments, carefully assembling the mechanism. The first time the pendulum swung and the clock ticked with perfect rhythm. It must have felt like hearing the heartbeat of the universe. Pendulum clocks were a revolution. Suddenly, time could be measured to within a minute, a day unheard of precision for that era. Churches rang bells more accurately. Scientists could record observations with dependable timing. Even daily life changed. Merchants could schedule shipments more reliably, and public events could start on time rather than somewhere around noon. Picture a small 17th century home on a winter evening. A family gathers near the hearth, the glow of the fire dancing on wooden beams. On the wall hangs a tall, elegant clock with a swinging brass pendulum. Its steady motion is like a lullaby, a soft reminder that the world keeps moving even while snow piles up outside. The children watch the pendulum swing and feel comforted by its predictability. Pendulum clocks also became beautiful works of art. Craftsmen carved wooden cases with flowers, scrolls, and cherubs. Some clocks had painted faces showing not only the hours, but also the phases of the moon. Wealthy households displayed them proudly, while towns invested in pendulum-regulated tower clocks to show their sophistication. A visitor entering a city might see the clock tower gleaming in the sun and think, "Ah, this is a place where people respect time." The pendulum's influence reached far beyond drawing rooms and town squares. In astronomy, more accurate clocks meant better star charts. In navigation, improved timing helped sailors estimate their longitude, bringing safer voyages. In science, experiments could be timed precisely, laying the groundwork for modern physics and chemistry. The swing of a weight on a string was reshaping the world's understanding of nature itself. Of course, pendulum clocks weren't perfect. Ship rocking at sea could throw the pendulum off. Even a change in temperature could slightly affect its swing. Still, compared to the clunky gear-driven clocks before them, pendulums felt like magic. Let's step into a workshop in 17th century Amsterdam. The smell of oil and wood shavings lingers in the air. A clockmaker in a linen apron polishes a brass bob until it shines, sets the pendulum swinging, and listens. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Outside, the city hums with carts and chatter. But in this little room, time has become a calm, dependable friend. There's something deeply soothing about a pendulum's rhythm. Even today, grandfather clocks in old houses have that same calming swing. It's as if the pendulum is whispering, "Steady now." The world may feel chaotic, but time moves in gentle arcs. The pendulum clock didn't just improve accuracy, it changed how people thought about time. Before, time felt flexible and a bit fuzzy. After Huygens' invention, time began to feel like a measurable, dependable force, something you could trust. Villages could coordinate work hours better. Scholars could record observations with confidence. Even the idea of punctuality, the expectation that you'd meet someone at an exact moment, grew stronger. As you settled deeper into your pillow, imagine a candlelit room 3 centuries ago. Outside, wind rattles the shutters. Inside, a pendulum swings steadily, its brass bob catching the light. A scholar dips his quill in ink and notes the hour, certain that for the first time in history, his measurement is reliable. Somewhere else, a sailor checks his ship's clock and adjusts course, trusting the tiny swings to guide him safely home. The pendulum's gift was more than accuracy. It gave people confidence in schedules, science, and even the possibility of progress. Every gentle swing was a promise. Time could be measured, understood, and shared. And so, the world grew a little smaller, a little more connected, all because of a simple weight, a string, and the quiet genius of a few curious minds. The open ocean has always been both a highway and a mystery. For centuries, sailors hugged the coastline because venturing into the vast blue without landmarks was dangerous. Knowing your longitude, your position east or west, was one of the great puzzles of exploration. Latitude was easier. You could measure the height of the sun or stars above the horizon, but longitude, that required knowing the exact time back home. Without it, ships drifted off course, sometimes hundreds of miles away from where they thought they were. In the age of exploration, brave navigators like Magellan and Columbus crossed oceans with crude maps and even cruder clocks. Their timekeeping was so poor that they relied on dead reckoning work mixed with hope. Imagine a sailor staring at an empty horizon, unsure whether he was days or weeks from land. The sea could be merciless, and without accurate time, it was like sailing blind. By the 17th century, the problem had become urgent. Empires depended on safe sea travel for trade and colonies. A wrong turn at sea could mean lost cargo, shipwrecks, or rival nations gaining an advantage. Governments even offered huge rewards for anyone who could solve the longitude problem. Enter John Harrison, a self-taught English carpenter and clockmaker. In the early 1700s, Harrison set out to build a clock that could survive the brutal conditions of a long sea voyage, rolling waves, salt air, and temperature swings. Pendulum clocks were useless aboard ships. The rocking motion threw the pendulum off balance. Harrison experimented with new designs, creating a series of marine timekeepers, each better than the last. Imagine Harrison in his workshop, shavings of wood curling onto the floor as he polishes a brass gear. The smell of oil and metal fills the air. Outside, London is bustling, but inside this small room, history is quietly being shaped. His first attempts were large and heavy, more like portable furniture than pocket watches. But slowly, through genius and patience, Harrison shrank his designs and improved their accuracy. Finally, his masterpiece H4, a watch-sized marine chronometer, changed everything. In 1764, during a sea trial, H4 kept time so precisely that a ship could determine its longitude within a few miles, even after weeks at sea. Sailors could now chart courses across oceans with confidence. The world's edges suddenly felt less distant. Picture a tall-masted ship under a night sky. The crew trims sails while a navigator, lantern in hand, checks the chronometer. He compares its time with the stars overhead and marks their position on a chart. The ocean, once a terrifying unknown, now feels a little more navigable. The chronometer didn't just save ships. It changed global trade, warfare, and exploration. England's naval power grew stronger because its ships arrived where they intended. Scientific voyages like Captain Cook's could map coastlines accurately and bring back knowledge of far-off lands. All because a humble carpenter dared to think he could fix time at sea.
Oh.
Even today, sailors and historians speak of Harrison with awe. His chronometers were works of art, graved, polished, and balanced with exquisite care. They weren't merely tools, but companions on dangerous journeys. A captain might pat the chronometer's case, as if thanking it for another safe crossing. Let us take a quiet moment to imagine the feeling of being on deck in the middle of the Atlantic. The stars stretch from horizon to horizon. The waves roll endlessly. And in a small cabin below, a tiny machine ticks steadily, linking you to a home port thousands of miles away. That ticking is a promise you're not lost. Not really. Time is your anchor. Marine chronometers remained essential for centuries, even as technology advanced. Only with the advent of satellites and GPS did we stop relying on them, but their legacy lives on in every precise clock and navigation system we use today. As you close your eyes tonight, picture a world before GPS, before even reliable maps. Picture the courage it took to sail into the unknown, trusting the stars and a small ticking watch to bring you safely to another shore. Time at sea wasn't just about hours and minutes. It was about survival, discovery, and the bold human spirit that refused to drift aimlessly in a vast and restless ocean. Long before clocks ticked or bells tolled, people had another tool for understanding time: the calendar. Where clocks rule our days, calendars shape our years. Across the world, every culture has looked to the sky, the seasons, and the rhythms of nature to decide when to plant, harvest, celebrate, or rest. Each calendar carries the story of the people who made it. Imagine ancient farmers watching the horizon at dawn. They notice when the days grow longer or shorter. They mark when certain stars rise just before the sun, knowing that these patterns foretell rain or harvest. Over time, these observations become a system, a way to predict the future by remembering the past. In ancient Egypt, the Nile River's flooding was life itself. To prepare for planting, Egyptians watched the star Sirius, whose rising signaled the river's annual overflow. Their calendar had 12 months of 30 days each, plus 5 extra days to balance the year. Those extra days were special, a time for festivals and honoring gods. Picture a village near the Nile, children playing under palm trees, elders scratching dates into clay tablets, and farmers glancing at the sky for Sirius's sparkle. Far away, the Maya civilization in Central America crafted some of the most sophisticated calendars ever. They didn't just track the sun, but also Venus and the moon. Their long count calendar could span thousands of years, linking human history to cosmic cycles. In bustling Mayan cities, priests in feathered headdresses watched the heavens from stone observatories, recording movements with astonishing precision. To them, time wasn't just practical, it was sacred. And then there's the Chinese calendar, a complex blend of lunar and solar cycles. It names years after animals: the rat, the dragon, the horse, creating a cycle of 12 that repeats endlessly. Festivals like the Lunar New Year still follow this rhythm today, filling streets with lanterns, laughter, and firecrackers. Imagine a snowy village in ancient China, families hanging red paper charms, sharing dumplings, and watching fireworks explode against the night sky, all because of the calendar's guidance. The Romans, too, shaped time in ways that echo today. Their early calendar was a bit chaotic. Months were added or removed as politics demanded. Then Julius Caesar, determined to bring order, introduced the Julian calendar in 45 BCE. It was more consistent, adding a leap year every 4 years. But even Caesar's reform wasn't perfect. By the 1500s, the calendar had drifted by 10 days. That's when Pope Gregory XIII introduced the Gregorian calendar, which most of the world now uses. Imagine scholars in Renaissance Europe scratching their heads as they skipped 10 days to fix the drift, going to bed on October 4th, 1582, and waking up on October 15th.
Calendars are more than math, they're culture.
The Islamic Hijri calendar, based purely on the moon, begins its count from the Prophet Muhammad's migration to Medina. It guides religious observances like Ramadan and Eid. The Hebrew calendar, lunisolar system, sets the timing for Jewish holidays like Passover and Yom Kippur. Each calendar encodes the values, stories, and hopes of its people. Think of the Persian Nowruz, the new year that begins on the spring equinox, celebrating renewal and light. Or the ancient Celtic festivals Samhain and Beltane that mark seasonal shifts. Even today, the echoes of these old calendars linger in our holidays, school schedules, and work weeks. Let's pause and imagine a marketplace thousands of years ago. Traders haggle over spices and cloth. Farmer consults a priest. When should I sow the seeds? The priest glances at a carved stone or a chart of stars and gives an answer shaped by centuries of observation. In that moment, time isn't just passing, it's shared wisdom. Calendars also reveal how people see themselves in the universe. Some cultures view time as a straight line: past, present, future. Others see it as a circle where endings lead to new beginnings. The Maya saw vast cycles of creation and destruction. The Chinese zodiac suggests patterns that repeat across generations. Even today, when we hang a new calendar on the wall, there's a little thrill of feeling that we're returning a page not just on paper, but on life itself. Yes. Picture yourself lying beneath a starry sky. Far above, the constellations wheel in their endless dance. Around the world, people from every age have watched these same stars, counting days and marking seasons. The Egyptian farmer, the Mayan priest, the Roman senator, the Chinese scholar, they all sought to make sense of time's flow. Nipped. In their calendars, they left us a gift, a way to remember, to plan, and to hope. The Industrial Revolution was like flipping a switch on human history. By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, factories were rising, steam engines were huffing, and whole cities were buzzing with new energy. Through it all, time became not just important, it became a bossy overseer. The gentle rhythms of farming life gave way to the strict schedules of industry. Imagine a small English village before the factories came. Farmers woke with the sun, worked until dusk, and rested when the seasons allowed. A late frost or an early harvest might shift things a little, but nobody was counting minutes. Then the first textile mill opened on the riverbank. Tall chimneys smoked, steady thump of looms filled the air. And on the mill's wall, large clock, its hands didn't care about sunrise or rain clouds. They demanded punctuality. Inside the factory, rows of workers bent over machines, their day measured by the ticking clock. The morning bell signaled the start of labor, another bell marked meal breaks, and an evening whistle released them. Time had become regimented, broken into shifts, tasks, and deadlines. Even children, some as young as 10, learned to live by the factory clock. Railroads magnified this transformation. Before trains, each town kept its own local time. Noon was when the sun was highest overhead. Trains needed schedules that spanned hundreds of miles. Train leaving Manchester had to match a timetable in London. So, in the mid-19th century, standard time zones began to take shape. Picture a railway clerk updating a schedule board while passengers squint at their pocket watches, adjusting them to railway time. It was a small but profound shift, local traditions giving way to global coordination. The Industrial Revolution didn't just make people watch the clock, it made them think of life itself as clockwork. Philosophers, inventors, and factory owners began to see the world as a giant machine, each part ticking in harmony. A factory floor mirrored this idea, workers and machines operating in perfect rhythm, like gears in a watch. Imagine walking through a bustling 19th century city street. Carriages rattle over cobblestones, steam whistles scream from a nearby engine yard, factory chimneys puff smoke into a gray sky. Above a crowded square, a clock tower looms, its hands sharp against the soot-streaked stone. For the first time, thousands of people live by the same time, not the sun overhead, but the clock's impartial face. This new obsession with punctuality even shaped culture. Schools rang bells to mark classes. Offices scheduled meetings. Social events started on the dot. The phrase "time is money" became a guiding principle. A late worker wasn't just inconveniencing a boss, they were upsetting the delicate machinery of progress. But not everyone welcomed this clockwork world. Romantic poets and rural families sometimes longed for the old rhythms of sunrise and sunset. A farmer-turned-factory worker might glance wistfully at a distant field and remember when time felt slower, gentler. Even today, we sometimes dream of escaping our schedules, of turning off alarms and letting the day unfold naturally. Let's pause and imagine a quiet moment in an industrial town. The day's work is done. The factory looms silent against the evening sky. In a small cottage nearby, a family sits around the fire. A pocket watch ticks softly on the mantel, its steady beat a reminder of the world outside. The father smiles faintly, thinking of the new opportunities this era has brought, even as he misses the freedom of a life without strict hours. The Industrial Revolution taught humanity to trust machines and measurements, standardized time, connected cities, and powered global trade. But it also revealed something tender. Even in a world ruled by clocks, people still cherished the timeless stories, music, laughter, and love. As you drift toward sleep, picture steam trains puffing across green hills, factory wheels turning under gaslight, and clock towers glowing faintly in the mist. The world has become a little smaller, a little faster, and a lot more synchronized. Yet beneath all the ticking and talking, the human heart still beats to its own quiet rhythm. By the late 19th century, railroads crisscrossed continents, carrying passengers, mail, cargo faster than anyone had imagined. But this new speed created a strange problem. Too many different times. Each town still set its clocks by the sun. Noon in one place might be 12:15, just a few miles away. For railroads, this was chaos. Trains couldn't run safely if every station kept its own time. Something had to change. Imagine a railway clerk in 1870s America, juggling schedules. He's sweating under a flickering oil lamp, comparing times from dozens of towns. The arrival from Chicago is due at 3:10 local time. But what does local mean when every whistle stop disagrees? It was more than inconvenient, it was dangerous. Collisions happened because crews didn't share a common clock. In Britain, railways had already adopted railway time decades earlier, using Greenwich Mean Time as a standard. Clocks at stations were reset to match the observatory in Greenwich, England. Passengers had to adjust their watches when boarding, but the trains finally ran smoothly. America watched this success and followed suit. By the 1880s, railroad companies in the United States and Canada agreed on a bold step: divide North America into 4 standard time zones: Eastern, Central, Mountain, and Pacific. On November 18, 1883, known as the Day of Two Noons, clocks across the continent were reset. In some towns, church bells rang twice that day, once for local noon and again for the new standard time. Imagine standing in a dusty Midwestern street, hearing 2 sets of bells and realizing the world had just synchronized in a way it never had before. Standard time was more than a railway fix. It was a cultural shift. For centuries, people had trusted the sun overhead or their local bell tower. Now, they trusted distant observatories and invisible lines on maps. The world was becoming connected in a new, almost invisible way. Picture a telegraph operator tapping out signals in a small frontier town. A message from a faraway city comes in, and the operator glances at the wall clock reset just days ago. For the first time, he knows that a person hundreds of miles away is living in the exact same minute. The adoption of standard time zones wasn't without grumbling. Some towns resisted, clinging to their local times. Farmers in particular weren't thrilled. To them, the sun's position mattered more than a railway schedule. But as telegraphs, newspapers, and trains tightened their grip on daily life, standard time won out. By 1918, the U.S. government officially adopted time zones into law. This idea spread worldwide. At the International Meridian Conference in 1884, representatives from 25 nations gathered in Washington, D.C., to choose a single prime meridian for measuring longitude and time. They selected Greenwich, making it the global standard. With that decision, the modern map of time began to take shape. Let's pause and imagine the scene. Delegates in stiff suits and bow ties poring over globes and charts. Outside, horses clatter on cobblestones and telegraph wires hum with messages. Inside, these men quietly redraw how humanity experiences time one line of longitude at a time. Standard time didn't just make trains safer, it transformed daily life. Newspapers could print schedules that made sense nationwide. Businesses could coordinate shipments. People began to think of time not as a local curiosity, but as a shared framework connecting distant places. A person in London could plan a telegraph conversation with someone in New York, confident they were speaking the same language of ours. Even today, the legacy of that moment shapes our lives. Every time you check a world clock on your phone or plan a video call across continents, you're benefiting from the Day of Two Noons. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine standing at a small-town train station in 1883. The air smells of coal smoke and autumn leaves. The station clock ticks steadily, set to the new standard. A whistle echoes across the fields and a locomotive appears on the horizon right on time. For the first time in history, people across a continent are living in sync. Their moments aligned by invisible lines stretching across the globe. By the early 20th century, cities had transformed into living machines, electric lights blinking, trams rattling, and factory whistles echoing through crowded streets. Time, now standardized and synchronized, was the invisible conductor of this urban orchestra. The modern city thrived on schedules, trains arriving to the minute, shops opening on cue, and office workers marching like clock hands through their days. Picture New York around 1910. Horse-drawn carriages mix with the first automobiles. Streetlights flicker to life as evening falls. Above the bustle, massive clock faces glow on skyscrapers, reminding everyone below that the city doesn't wait. A businessman tips his hat and quickens his pace. His appointment is at 7 sharp, not around sundown, as it might have been in his grandfather's day. The spread of electric lighting made nighttime feel less like an end and more like an extension of day. Factories could run longer shifts, theaters could host late performances, and diners could stay open past midnight. The city became a place where the day never truly ended, and clocks ruled every glowing corner. Public clocks became both landmarks and symbols of progress. Think of Big Ben in London or the Wrigley Building clock in Chicago, icons reminding citizens that their city was modern, it's powerful, and connected to the wider world. A traveler arriving by train might step onto the platform, look up at a grand clock tower, and feel the comforting sense that they were part of a vast, orderly network. The telephone and telegraph amplified this connection. A clerk in Paris could send a message to London, and thanks to standard time, both would instantly understand the hour. International business deals, stock trades, and even wars began to depend on precise timing. In cities buzzing with new technologies, missing a train or a meeting was indeed just an inconvenient sit, was a sign you were out of step with modern life. Let us pause to imagine a single moment. A young couple in 1920s, Berlin walking home beneath gas lamps after a late movie. A tram rattles past, its driver glancing at a pocket watch. Somewhere in a quiet apartment, a writer taps out a story on a typewriter. Glancing at the clock on the wall as midnight approaches, the city feels alive, pulsing to the rhythm of gears and bells. Yet this clock-driven world wasn't without its tensions. As cities grew faster, some people felt overwhelmed. Artists and poets complained that time was becoming a cage. They longed for slower days, for sunsets watched without checking a wristwatch. Even as technology promised efficiency, it quietly demanded more of everyone's attention. But for many, synchronized time meant opportunity. Trains and ships ran reliably, letting immigrants cross oceans to build new lives. Urban workers could plan leisure, knowing their evenings off would begin on time. Lovers could meet beneath a clock tower, confident they were sharing the same precise moment. Imagine standing on a bridge in 1930s Paris. The Seine glitters under the moonlight. On the horizon, Notre Dame's bells ring out, and a clock on a cafe wall ticks softly. All around you, taxis honk, music drifts from a dance hall, and somewhere, a bakery begins its early morning shift. The city hums with life, its heartbeat kept by the steady pulse of time. As you drift towards sleep, picture the glow of a city skyline at night, its lights twinkling like a constellation on Earth. Each clock face on every tower is a star in that constellation, keeping the world in sync. The modern city, with all its noise and rush, is really just a grand stage where time plays the quiet role of conductor guiding, nudging and reminding us that every moment is part of something larger. When you hold a modern wristwatch or glance at your phone's clock, it feels simple, just numbers changing on a screen. But behind those numbers is a long, quiet revolution. The science of timekeeping. Humans have always measured time by the sun, the moon, or a flowing stream. But as our questions got sharper, so did our tools. Let's step back to the 17th century, when scientists were tinkering with pendulums and gears. Galileo Galilei, watching a swinging lamp in a cathedral, noticed its swings were regular. That observation, just a curious glance upward, helped shape the first accurate mechanical clocks. A century later, John Harrison, a British carpenter with a genius for precision, built marine chronometers so accurate they could guide ships across oceans. Sailors trusted his clocks more than the stars themselves. Fast forward to the 20th century, scientists were no longer content with swinging pendulums. They turned to the tiniest building blocks of matter, atoms. An atomic clock doesn't care about whether or where it keeps time by measuring the vibrations of atoms, often cesium. These clocks are so precise that they might drift by only 1 second in millions of years. That is like tossing a pebble into a lake and expecting the ripples to reach the same shore for eons. Atomic clocks changed everything. GPS satellites, for example, rely on them to pinpoint your location. Without those perfect ticks, your map app would send you wandering miles off course. The synchronization of financial markets, internet servers, even the electrical grid depends on these invisible metronomes floating high above Earth. Let's imagine one. A technician in a clean, bright lab, adjusting a shimmering metal chamber the size of a shoebox. Inside, invisible cesium atoms vibrate in perfect rhythm. The technician looks at the display and smiles. Time itself is being counted at an unimaginable level of precision. The science didn't stop there. Physicists now use optical lattice clocks, measuring the oscillations of light waves trapped by lasers. These devices are so sensitive they can detect the slight warping of time caused by gravity, as predicted by Einstein's theory of relativity. If you place one clock on a mountain and another at sea level, the mountain clock actually runs a tiny bit faster. Time, it turns out, isn't perfectly uniform. It stretches and bends with the universe. Think of it. In a single building, two clocks, just a few floors apart, can disagree ever so slightly about how fast the seconds pass. It's like time is a soft fabric, tugged gently by Earth's gravity. The science of timekeeping, ISNT, just about making better watches it's about understanding the universe itself. Even as our tools have become more complex, the human feelings around time haven't changed much. A monk in a medieval tower ringing a bell at sunset, a scientist calibrating a laser clock are both doing the same thing, reaching for order in a world that never stops moving. Now picture yourself drifting above Earth at night, like an astronaut in the International Space Station. Below, continents glow with city lights, each dot living by the beat of invisible clocks. The station itself speeds along, where astronauts must carefully adjust their schedules as they orbit the planet every 90 minutes. Out there, timekeeping isn't just science, it's survival. The next time you glance at a digital display or hear a watch tick, remember, behind that sound is a story of Galileo's lamp, Harrison's chronometers, cesium atoms, and lasers holding light in place. The science of timekeeping is a quiet triumph, a bridge between our ancient awe of the sky and our modern need to navigate a fast, connected world. Calendars are more than boxes of dates on a page. They are the way cultures weave their memories, harvests, and hopes into time. Across the world, humans have built beautiful and sometimes complicated systems to mark the days. Each one tells a story about the people who used it, their beliefs, and their place under the sky. Let's begin with the Islamic Hijri calendar. It's purely lunar. Each month begins when the crescent moon is sighted. This means Islamic months drift through the seasons over the years. Ramadan might fall in the heat of summer one generation, and in cool winter nights the next. Imagine families watching the evening sky, waiting for that delicate silver curve to appear, a moment of wonder repeated for more than 1,000 years. Then there's the Hebrew calendar, which mixes lunar months with solar adjustments. Jewish festivals like Passover always stay close to spring because of clever leap months added every few years. It's as if the calendar dances between the moon and the sun, keeping traditions tied to both. Picture a small community gathered around candles, telling ancient stories at a table set with familiar foods. Their celebration perfectly timed by a calendar that has survived exiles, migrations, and centuries. In China, the traditional lunisolar calendar still guides festivals like the Lunar New Year and the Mid-Autumn Festival. Red lanterns swing in the wind, fireworks crackle, and families reunite all because of careful sky watching that began thousands of years ago. Each zodiac year carries an animal's personality, a touch of magic in the steady march of days. The Hindu calendar family is even more varied, with regional versions across India and Nepal. Many festivals, Diwali's lights, Holi's colors are set according to these ancient calculations. Temples and astrologers still consult these calendars to choose auspicious dates for weddings, journeys, and rituals. Imagine the flicker of oil lamps on carved stone walls, prayers rising into the night air as people honor both tradition and the heavens. Travel to Ethiopia, and you'll find the Ethiopian calendar, which is about 7 years behind the Gregorian one. New Year's Day in Katash falls in September, when the highlands are lush after the rains. Villagers wear white clothes and carry bright yellow flowers. For them, the year turns not in winter's chill, but in the season of bloom. The Persian calendar, also called the Solar Hijri calendar, is one of the most accurate solar calendars in use today. Nowruz, the Persian New Year, is celebrated on the spring equinox. Families set a half-seen table with symbolic items like apples, garlic, and goldfish. When the sunlight hits that perfect balance of day and night, they know a new year has truly begun. And then, of course, there's the Gregorian calendar, the one most of the world now uses. Born from a papal reform in 1582, it quietly governs our work weeks, school terms, and birthdays. But even it carries echoes of ancient Rome in its month names. January for Janus, the two-faced god of beginnings. March for Mars, the god of war. Calendars aren't just practical, They're emotional. They mark the dates we look forward to: a loved one's birthday, a festival, a long-awaited holiday. They also hold memories, anniversaries, historic victories, and quiet remembrances. In every culture, flipping a page or watching the moon signals continuity, a gentle reminder that life moves in cycles, even when the world feels unpredictable. Now picture a bustling city tonight. A mosque's crescent glimmers under the stars, a synagogue's candles glow in a window, and a family strings lanterns across a Chinatown street. Somewhere else, a person circles a date on a paper calendar above their desk. All these acts are part of one shared human instinct: to anchor ourselves in time, to celebrate and remember. As you drift towards sleep, think of all these calendars turning their pages together, each in its own rhythm. Across deserts, mountains, and oceans, people have always looked up at the same sky and asked the same question: what day is it in the story of the world? Long before Caesar's grand reforms, Rome's early calendar was, let's call it, messy. It had only 10 months at first, starting in March and ending in December. Winter, the Romans didn't bother giving it months. They just sort of treated the cold season as a time between years. Imagine trying to schedule a birthday party when the year simply stops for a few months. Later, January and February were added to the front, but the calendar still wandered badly. Priests in charge of adjusting leap months sometimes tweaked the dates for political reasons, lengthening a year to keep an ally in power, or shortening one to cut an enemy's term. It was less a calendar and more a political tool. By the time Julius Caesar rose to power, Roman dates were completely out of sync with the seasons. Farmers were planting crops at the wrong times, and festivals drifted far from their intended spots. Caesar, known for military strategy and ambition, also had an eye for order. In 46 BCE, he decided to fix Rome's timekeeping once and for all. He turned to an Alexandrian astronomer named Sosigenes. Together, they studied the Egyptian solar calendar, which tracked the sun's path with remarkable accuracy. The solution was to anchor the year to the solar cycle 365 days, with an extra day every 4 years to catch up. But first, Caesar had to clean up the existing mess. The year 46 BCE became known as the Year of Confusion because he added extra months in total. 445 days to realign the calendar with the seasons. Imagine living through a year that just wouldn't end. You'd blow out your birthday candles, and months later, you'd still be in the same year. Once the reform settled, Rome now had a calendar that mostly behaved. The new system, called the Julian calendar, named January after Janus, the two-faced god of beginnings, and kept the traditional Roman month names like March for Mars and July, renamed for Julius Caesar himself. Later, August would be named for Caesar's heir, Augustus. This reform had a huge impact beyond Rome. Over centuries, the Julian calendar spread through Europe and the expanding Roman Empire. It became the backbone for planning harvests, battles, and festivals. For over 1,600 years, people lived by Caesar's structure of time. Picture a Roman farmer after the reform, standing in a field under a crisp blue sky. He plants seeds confident that spring will truly arrive when his calendar says it should. Or imagine a young couple arranging their wedding under the certainty of fixed seasons. No priest. Whim would suddenly bump their big day by weeks. Of course, the Julian calendar wasn't perfect. Its leap year rule was slightly off. It added a tiny bit too much time each year. That error wouldn't show itself for centuries, but by the 1500s, the seasons were drifting again. That's when Pope Gregory XIII stepped in, leading to the Gregorian calendar most of us use today. But without Caesar's bold move, timekeeping might have remained a tangled puzzle much longer. Let's pause and picture Rome at dusk, after the reform. The Forum glows under torchlight. Market stalls close, senators gossip in shadowed porticos, and somewhere a scholar carefully marks the day on a wax tablet. The city hums in sync with the sun again, thanks to one man's determination to bring order to chaos. As you close your eyes, think of how a single decision 2,000 years ago still touches every planner, smartphone, and calendar on your wall. Caesar may be remembered for battles and politics, but tonight, we remember him for something quieter, giving the world a steadier heartbeat of days. By the mid-1500s, Caesar's trusty Julian calendar had done a decent job for 16 centuries. But tiny errors just 11 minutes a year had quietly stacked up like grains of sand in an hourglass. Over the centuries, the seasons began to slip. By 1582, spring was arriving about 10 days early. For farmers, priests, and anyone who cared about planting or holy days, this was no small problem. In Rome, Pope Gregory XIII realized something had to be done. Festivals like Easter were drifting far from their intended seasons, threatening to break the rhythm of the Christian year. Gregory gathered astronomers and mathematicians, among them the brilliant Christopher Clavius, to design a correction. Their solution was both bold and subtle. First, they decided to skip 10 days to get the calendar back in sync. In countries that adopted the reform right away, people went to bed on Thursday, October 4th, 1582, and woke up on Friday, October 15th. Some folks joked they'd lost part of their lives overnight. Rumors spread, had landlords cheated tenants out of rent days? Had lives been stolen? But the world, of course, went on. Second, they refined the leap year rule. The Julian system had added a leap day every 4 years, which was slightly too generous. Gregory's adjustment kept that rule, but skipped leap years on most century years except those divisible by 400. That SY 2000 was a leap year. But 1900 wasn't. This small tweak kept the calendar closely aligned with Earth's orbit. Not everyone embraced the change immediately. Catholic countries such as Spain, Portugal, and Italy adopted the Gregorian calendar right away, but Protestant nations were suspicious. They weren't eager to follow a papal decree. England didn't switch until 1752, by which time the discrepancy had grown to 11 days. Imagine the confusion. We went to sleep on September 2nd and woke up on September 14th. In some places, angry crowds even shouted, "Give us our 11 days." The reform rippled outward over centuries. Russia didn't adopt the Gregorian calendar until after the Bolshevik Revolution in 1918. Greece waited until 1923. For a long time, parts of the world operated on different calendars, a reminder that time itself can be political. Picture a quiet European village on the first day of the change. The baker, setting out loaves of bread, laughs with a neighbor about losing 10 days. A farmer checks his fields, reassured that spring will return when it should. Bells chime in a distant church, their echoes carrying the weight of centuries of adjustment. The Gregorian calendar proved so reliable that today, almost the entire world uses it. Whether you're scheduling a video call across continents, planning a holiday, or marking a birthday, you're relying on a system fine-tuned nearly 500 years ago. Even non-Christian cultures often use it alongside their traditional calendars. That's simply because it keeps the global clock running smoothly. As you breathe slowly and close your eyes tonight, think about those skipped days in 1582, the people who blinked and found themselves nearly 2 weeks ahead. Think of Gregory XIII, Clavius, and the many astronomers who trusted math and the heavens to guide their decision. And remember that even something as steady as a calendar is the result of human effort, quiet debate, and a touch of courage. Long before pendulums or atomic clocks, humans tried to understand time, not just with measurements, but with stories. When you can't hold something in your hands, sometimes the best way to explain it is through myth or philosophy. And time slippery, invisible, unstoppable, has inspired some of humanity's most beautiful tales. In ancient Greece, they imagined Kronos, a powerful, almost cosmic figure who ruled over the flow of time itself. Sometimes he was shown as an old man with a long beard and wings, reminding people that time flies and ages us all. Later, another figure, Kairos, represented the perfect moment, a fleeting opportunity you had to seize. It's a comforting thought. Even in a rushing river of minutes, there are perfect instants worth catching. The Romans turned Kronos into Saturn, a god of plenty and cycles. Saturn's festival, Saturnalia, was a time of feasting and role reversals. Masters served slaves and rules were relaxed. It hinted that time itself can turn the world upside down now and then. In Hindu tradition, time is seen as cyclical rather than linear. The universe is born, grows, collapses, and is reborn again in vast ages, called yugas. Think of it like an eternal, cosmic breath. Inhale, exhale, repeat. This idea suggests that endings are never truly final, and beginnings are endless. The Norse spoke of Yggdrasil, the world tree, around which time and events unfolded. The Norns, three mystical women, wove the threads of fate at its roots past, present, and future intertwined. Even the mighty gods couldn't escape their weaving. Philosophers, too, have wrestled with time's mystery. Heraclitus, a Greek thinker, said, "You cannot step into the same river twice, because the water and you are always changing." Time to him was a river of constant becoming. Centuries later, St. Augustine wondered aloud, "What is time?" No one asked me. I know. If I wish to explain it, I do not. That puzzled honesty still feels familiar today. In some African traditions, time isn't a strict line of past, present, and future. It's more about events and relationships. What matters is when things happen together, not ticking off seconds. In many indigenous cultures of the Americas, time is viewed as a circle, with seasons and ancestors forever returning. Let's pause to picture a starlit night thousands of years ago. A small group sits around a fire. Sparks dance upward, like tiny stars themselves. The children listen, eyes wide, feeling both tiny and infinite at once. Even today, when we have atomic clocks splitting seconds into unimaginably small fragments, we still lean on stories. Movies about time travel, books about alternate histories, phrases like "time heals all wounds" are echoes of our ancient urge to give time a personality. There's a gentle humor in how we talk about it, too. We say time flies when we're having fun, but when we're waiting in line, it crawls like a lazy snail. Try to save time, as if we could put minutes in a jar. We spend time, waste it, or find it, as if ours were coins lost between couch cushions. Perhaps time is best seen as a companion rather than a tyrant. It's there when a baby takes a first step, when friends laugh until their sides ache, and when a sunset paints the sky. Myths and philosophies remind us that, no matter how precise our clocks, the meaning of time is found in these shared, fleeting moments. As you settle under the blankets tonight, think of Chrono's wings, the Norn's threads, and the endless cosmic cycles. Somewhere, someone is watching the same stars you are, wondering about time in their own way. And just for now, you don't have to measure anything, just breathe in this moment. It's perfect kairos, and let the river of time carry you gently toward dreams. The industrial age changed almost everything about daily life, and time became its quiet but powerful boss. Before factories, most people followed natural rhythms: sunrise for work, sunset for rest, and seasons for planting and harvest. But when steam engines roared to life and smokestacks pierced the sky, the clock became the new sun. Imagine a mill town in the 1800s. Chimneys belched smoke into a pale morning sky. Workers streamed through factory gates at the same hour, not because of the dawn's light, but because the factory whistle shrieks. Inside, gears grind and belts spin, and every second is counted. A late arrival isn't just inconvenient, it's a fine or a lost job. Railways tightened the grip. Trains could not wait for a farmer's sense of soon or a village's local noon. Tickets and timetables demanded precision, and cities adjusted their clocks to match. The concept of time discipline emerged. The idea that people should align their lives to the steady ticking of machines rather than the shifting patterns of nature. Picture a small workshop in Manchester. Child glances at a dusty wall clock, knowing the foreman watches every tick. Lunchtime comes not when hunger hits, but when the hands point straight up. Even school children learned to read clocks early, as punctuality became a prized virtue. This shift wasn't all harsh whistles and rigid schedules. Standardized time brought opportunity. Postal services became more reliable. Goods could travel quickly across regions. Families could plan visits by knowing exactly when a train would arrive. The world felt smaller, connected by a network of ticking clocks. Yet some resisted. Farmers and rural communities still close to the land grumbled about the tyranny of the clock. Poets mourned the loss of long, meandering afternoons. Social critics warned that treating people like parts of a machine would squeeze the joy out of life. And indeed, factory life often left little room for leisure. Sunset might glow red over the rooftops, but the loom or lathe would not stop until the bell rang. As cities grew, new inventions helped people keep pace. Pocket watches became common, ticking companions in waistcoat pockets. Later, wristwatches would become fashionable in the early 20th century, making punctuality even easier. In bustling cities, public clocks on towers and buildings became landmarks, reminding everyone of the invisible grid of ours, binding them together. Let us pause for a quiet image. A young woman in 1885 steps out of a textile factory after a long shift. The sky is streaked with purple twilight. She pulls a small watch from her pocket, checking the time before catching a tram home. The watch as tiny hands gleam in the fading light, a little piece of order in a rapidly changing world. Over time, labor movements fought for fairer schedules. The idea of the 8-hour workday, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will spread. Though the industrial age initially chained people to strict timetables, it also sparked conversations about balance and human dignity. Even today, echoes of the industrial age linger. The 9-to-5 workday, school bells, rush hour traffic are all descendants of factory schedules and train timetables. Every time you set an alarm for work or school, you're following a pattern set in motion over 2 centuries ago. As you drift toward sleep, imagine a quiet factory floor after hours. The machine stands silent, gears at rest. Outside, the last curls of steam fade into the night sky. Somewhere, a clock on a tower ticks steadily, keeping the city in sync. The industrial age taught us to live by the clock, but it also left us with a reminder. Behind every tick is a choice about how we spend our moments. We've come a long way from sundials, casting shadows on stone. Today, time lives in our pocket sand, on our wrists, our walls, and even in space. The digital age didn't just give us smaller clocks, it rewrote our relationship with time itself. Think about your smartphone. At any moment, you can glance down and see the exact second in perfect sync with satellites orbiting high above. There's no guessing, no winding a watch, no comparing to a church bell. Even when you fly halfway around the world, your phone politely adjusts, almost as if whispering, "Don't worry, I've got the time covered." This precision began with atomic clocks, first built in the mid-20th century. Instead of swinging pendulums or vibrating quartz crystals, atomic clocks count the oscillations of atoms billions of tiny beats per second. They're so accurate that if one had started ticking at the dawn of the universe, it would be off by less than a second today. These clocks guide GPS systems, stock markets, and even the internet's heartbeat. Without them, our digital world would stumble. The internet changed things further. You can schedule meetings with people oceans away, binge watch entire seasons of shows in a weekend, or share a live video with friends across the globe. Time zones still exist, but they've grown softer, blurred by instant communication. A person in Tokyo can chat with someone in New York as easily as if they were next door. Yet this convenience comes with a twist. Once people measured time with patience waiting for letters, seasons, or trains, we now live in a world of notifications and deadlines. Single ping can interrupt dinner, work, or even a moment of quiet reflection. Many of us now feel there's never enough time, even though we've never been so good at measuring it. Let's paint a scene. A person sits in bed at night, the glow of a phone screen illuminating their face. Outside, the stars move overhead, just as they always have. Inside, the clock on the device updates every second with silent, perfect precision. But time hasn't changed. That's still the same gentle river. It's our attention that's been captured. Despite the rush, there's a hidden beauty here. Digital timekeeping connects us to people we might never meet otherwise. It lets scientists coordinate telescopes across continents to photograph black holes. It lets families video call across oceans. It even lets bedtime historians like us send sleepy stories across the world, so someone thousands of miles away can nod off to tales of ancient sundials. Some people are starting to push back against the hurry. They practice digital minimalism or take breaks from their devices. Others buy analog watches again, delighting in the tick of a physical second hand. There's comfort in the idea that, even in a digital world, we can choose how we mark our days. Think about the word pocket for a moment. A century ago, a pocket watch was a prized possession, a little circle of brass and glass. Today, our pockets hold devices that know the exact time, the weather in Paris, and the phase of the moon, all at once. It's miraculous and a little absurd. And yet, under all the screens and signals, the old rhythms remain. The sun rises and sets, the seasons turn. The heart beats its steady drum. Whether through a shadow on stone or an app on a phone, what we're really measuring isn't just minutes, it's the moments that matter. As you close your eyes tonight, Let the quiet hum of the digital age fade. Imagine the faint tick of an atomic clock somewhere, counting perfectly in the darkness. Imagine a satellite high above, sweeping over oceans and mountains, quietly helping your phone know the time. And then, let go of the numbers. Breathe. The seconds will keep themselves while you rest. By the mid-1500s, Caesar's trusty Julian calendar had done a decent job for 16 centuries. But tiny errors just 11 minutes a year had quietly stacked up like grains of sand in an hourglass. Over the centuries, the seasons began to slip. By 1582, spring was arriving about 10 days early. For farmers, priests, and anyone who cared about planting or holy days, this was no small problem. In Rome, Pope Gregory XIII realized something had to be done. Festivals like Easter were drifting far from their intended seasons. Threatening to break the rhythm of the Christian year, Gregory gathered astronomers and mathematicians, among them the brilliant Christopher Clavius, to design a correction. Their solution was both bold and subtle. First, they decided to skip 10 days to get the calendar back in sync. In countries that adopted the reform right away, people went to bed on Thursday, October 4th, 1582, and woke up on Friday, October 15th. Some folks joked they'd lost part of their lives overnight. Rumors spread, had landlords cheated tenants out of rent days? Had lives been stolen? But the world, of course, went on. Second, they refined the leap year rule. The Julian system had added a leap day every 4 years, which was slightly too generous. Gregory's adjustment kept that rule, but skipped leap years on most century years except those divisible by 400. That SY 2000 was a leap year. But 1900 wasn't. This small tweak kept the calendar closely aligned with Earth's orbit. Not everyone embraced the change immediately. Catholic countries such as Spain, Portugal, and Italy adopted the Gregorian calendar right away, but Protestant nations were suspicious. They weren't eager to follow a papal decree. England didn't switch until 1752, by which time the discrepancy had grown to 11 days. Imagine the confusion. We went to sleep on September 2nd and woke up on September 14th. In some places, angry crowds even shouted, "Give us our 11 days." The reform rippled outward over centuries. Russia didn't adopt the Gregorian calendar until after the Bolshevik Revolution in 1918. Greece waited until 1923. For a long time, parts of the world operated on different calendars, a reminder that time itself can be political. Picture a quiet European village on the first day of the change. The baker, setting out loaves of bread, laughs with a neighbor about losing 10 days. A farmer checks his fields, reassured that spring will return when it should. Bells chime in a distant church, their echoes carrying the weight of centuries of adjustment. The Gregorian calendar proved so reliable that today, almost the entire world uses it. Whether you're scheduling a video call across continents, planning a holiday, or marking a birthday, you're relying on a system fine-tuned nearly 500 years ago. Even non-Christian cultures often use it alongside their traditional calendars. That's simply because it keeps the global clock running smoothly. As you breathe slowly and close your eyes tonight, think about those skipped days in 1582, the people who blinked and found themselves nearly 2 weeks ahead. Think of Gregory XIII, Clavius, and the many astronomers who trusted math and the heavens to guide their decision. And remember that even something as steady as a calendar is the result of human effort, quiet debate, and a touch of courage.